pretty cool. But if we pan over to the U30C, by golly, that looks pretty much. Hey everybody, welcome back to the basement. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be going in the way back machine to the Volume 2 catalog from 2007. So that's what, 18 years ago? This is an old locomotive. We're going to check it out right here on Chris's Trains and Things. Another U-boat. We just talked about the U28Cs that were just delivered from Lionel. In fact, we're going to look at the differences in these models. There's not much of a difference in these models. I have the Metka custom run U28C on the layout, so we'll do a little side by side. But this is the U30C. It was in production much longer than the U28Cs were. We'll talk about the history a little bit, but this was an engine that I was able to grab from trains.com. That's trains with a Z. They had it on their website for an absolute steal, and I was able to pick it up and have them bring it to the Springfield Big E show, and I picked it up there, saved a little bit of money on shipping. If you're looking for a model that's really old that you can't find in stores anymore, check out Trains. They have some great inventory, and you can always keep a fresh look on what's coming in and what they're adding to their inventory. And if you use code CTAT at checkout, you're going to save yourself some money. Or go to trains.com/CTAT to help support the channel. We greatly appreciate that. But the Volume 2 catalog from 2007 featured these U30C locomotives, and this MSRP'd for $454.99 back then. And it's a cool little locomotive, obviously here in the Conrail scheme. Now, this was an early legacy locomotive. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a legacy board in it anymore. Found that out as we were programming it. I had to reach out to my buddy Sid because I was having some issues. It runs really well in TMCC, but when we go into legacy mode, it'll operate, but the buttons don't match up and the horn doesn't blow. I can run it in a lash up, which was my goal. This was always supposed to just run in a lash up with my SD45. But no true legacy controls because someone, before they sold it to Trains, pulled the legacy board out and replaced it with the TMCC board. So it makes me feel even better that I got such a great deal on this locomotive because I'm sure the Trains crew didn't even know that it doesn't have legacy board. So I have reached out to their customer service, but honestly, I got such a good deal on this, it's really not that big of a deal. So we're going to enjoy it, and I think what we're going to do today is make this a true Conrail engine, and we're going to be weathering this locomotive as well. I've got my SD45, the Brady's custom run from a couple years ago. That's weathered, so I think we need to make this match a little bit. This is a locomotive that is just a utilitarian engine, right? The U-boat for the Universal Series from General Electric. This is meant to just be dirty and grimy. So I think we're going to show that in this video as well as we make this a really unique locomotive. All right, the U30C locomotive was designed and built by General Electric from 1966, late 1966. This replaced the U28Cs that we just reviewed. They were in production from 1966 to 1976 with about 600 of these produced. So a much more popular engine. Now this does feature 2 3-axle trucks, a CC arrangement, and U30, so it produced 3,000 horsepower. All right, most of these ended up being scrapped, although a few others were rebuilt later on, only a handful of these. And really, these became popular because the SD40s from EMD were so popular that they couldn't keep up with production. And so when railroads needed an engine and the SD40s were kind of being delayed, the U30C was a great substitute, and so that's why they were able to sell so many of these. Now, the Burlington Northern Railroad had the most at about 180 of these purchased by them. The UP followed with 150. Obviously, the one that we see here is a Conrail version, so a repaint when Conrail came to be, but a pretty unique old utilitarian style locomotive, and famously dubbed the U-boat. It goes along with its other U-boat brethren. Now, my guess is when we look side by side at these toolings, remember this tooling is from 2007, this model, and we're going to compare it to the one from 2024. My guess is there's not a whole lot of differences that we're going to see. The pieces that made up these engines, I don't think there was a whole lot of differences in general when they were produced by GE, other than what's under the hood. So let's go ahead. We're going to pull up the Metka custom run. This is the supporting our troops version. And so this does have some unique add-on details, including a bell location and so on and so forth. But let's look at these side by side and see if we can see any differences. So first off, here is the Metka supporting our troops 1776 version, the camo paint. As I mentioned, we're going to have some separately applied add-on detailing with the bell here up on the roof in the middle there. And then we've got a light up front as well, which is pretty cool. But if we pan over to the U30C, by golly, that looks pretty much exactly the same. We've got the same vent detailing. We have the same molded in detailing as well, including the fuel tank. Below, the truck detailing is exactly the same. I think it's safe to say it's the exact same model, just with a different name. Now, what nuance differences are there in the real ones? I don't know. I'm not a railroad expert, nor do I ever really try to pretend to be. You know, this is what they model. This is what they told me it is on the box. So that's what we're going to be reviewing. We've got a U30C here. We've got a U28C here. Now, is there any differences in these models? Probably not. But it is what it is. There's, you know, when we get to model railroading like this, it's going to cost significantly more money to create a new tooling just for maybe one different separately applied detail or vent location, etc. So pretty neat though. We're going to go ahead and fire this thing up and we'll hear some of the basic crew talk that it has. Like I said, it does not have the legacy chip. The smoke unit is not working either, but I got this thing for such a great deal. I am not complaining. And what we're going to do is weather this thing as well. So we're going to take it to the back room. We're going to mask up the windows and the lights, and then we're going to go ahead and grime this thing up and make it look like it's been used and abused on the Conrail for many, many years. And then we'll send it around the layout again with the SD45. Here is one last view, pre-weathered, of this U30C. So its color is definitely darker than the SD45 was originally. So I'm going to have to try to fade it and then grime it up. So we're going to do our best to get these close to matching. We're not going to get them 100%, but we're going to do our best. I know that this is not for everyone, but it's something that I like to do, especially with my Conrail engines, and especially when they don't match. So I think this will look really good when we get this thing grimed up and back on the layout. Let's go mask it up. So I've got my Lazy Susan here. This is something that I built a number of years ago. It's just 2 pieces of plywood and then a swivel section that you'd have on like a bar stool that I bought online. And then I just have this piece of track here. And this allows me to just keep the engine there and spin this. So that's really handy. And so what we're going to do here is just set this engine here. And what we need to do is begin to mask off the areas that we don't want paint to hit. So we're going to set this off to the side. I've got my painter's tape here. I've got some extra tape, and I'm just going to use my knife here to cut this tape. And we're going to mask off the windows and lights, number boards, things that we don't want to get covered with paint. And, you know, anything, we're not going to do the underside of this locomotive, so there's not, I don't have to worry about pickup rollers or anything like that. And then I always go through with some denatured alcohol, and I'll clean up the wheels and anything like that that might have gotten some paint on it, because that'll impact the continuity with picking up that ground on those outside rails. We'll clean all that stuff up at the end, but for now, let's go ahead and mask this thing off, and then we can go ahead and begin thinking about how we want to paint it. And then do we want to have any, you know, patched doors or anything like that? So for instance, sometimes you'll see a unit that has like a new door because an old one was busted or something. So that would be, you know, fresh paint on that as it was replaced from an older unit, or maybe just a black door. I think we'll probably just play it safe this time around than just grind this thing up. We can always do that later on if we want to. So we've got this masked off, good enough for now. And so what we're going to do, I've got the box here for some overspray. I've got my hood on. I'm going to have my respirator on. And we are going to start by trying to just kind of fade this locomotive a little bit. You know, the other one's definitely more lighter blue. So I'm going to be coming over with a white to fade. And then we'll just start adding some blacks and grimes and things like that. And so I'll be filming some of this, probably not talking through the whole thing. Maybe we'll do a voiceover at the end. I'm gonna put my gloves on. We're gonna give this a good once over clean, and then we're gonna be using an airbrush today. I also use a lot of these Vallejo paints and washes. We're also going to be using some powders today as well. We're going to try to put some white streaking in underneath the Conrail logo and some of the numbers, as that paint would streak over time and sun fade and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started here. For the first round here, I'm going to be using just a white paint. I'm going to dilute this in my airbrush and just kind of give the whole engine a once over. Again, I'm really trying to get this blue to look faded. You know, it's going to get sun faded. So we're going to do that by just giving it a total once over with this white paint. It's going to start to lighten it up a little bit. We're going to hit the fade a little bit heavier on the roof panels where it's going to be getting sun bleached and things like that. All right, so I took like an oxide paint and hit the couplers with it as well. Usually when you see couplers, they're going to be frosted. So I hit that with the oxide paint, and then I'm switching over to a brown, maybe a burnt umber. I'm not sure exactly which one this is. And I'm going to hit the lower portion of the locomotive with this. We're going to hit the front and rear pilots pretty heavy, where you're going to get, you know, you're going to be getting stuff pulled up from the locomotive in front and so on and so forth, and just really get this start to grimed up. And then we're going to hit the trucks with this as well. All right, so this is just going to be black, and really we're going to be looking for like areas to grime this up. So we're going to start with the exhaust. You know, the exhaust is never going to get cleaned, so we're going to hit that with black, and we're going to hit the black around the roof panels and then down along the sides as well, where, you know, it would you know, bleed down in the rain and so on and so forth. And then the vents are going to get grimed up as well. You know, they're not going to be a bright blue all the time. They're going to get pretty dirty. They're going to hold a lot of the grime too, just by the nature of the vent. So we're going to hit those with some of this black as well to provide some contrast there. And there we have it on the layout. I think we did a pretty good job fading that blue paint, lightening it up a little bit, and then obviously we're going to grime it up like we did. Now this is just step one. There's, you know, some of the exhaust here didn't settle quite as evenly as I would like. So I'll come back over this later on and just blend this together a little bit more, and then cover up some of that fade as well. We got a little heavy there at the bottom, so that's not quite as even as I'd like. So we'll come back over and refinish that later on. But overall, for first round, I'm pretty happy with that. I think it looks pretty good. We can blend a little bit more on the roof there too. But I think that looks a little bit better now that we've got both of those grimed up. I also didn't do any dry brushing on this yet, so that'll happen as well. That'll help some of the details on the trucks pop and things like that as well. So there we go. All right, guys, so there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this one. You know, maybe not for you. I know that the weathering is not for everyone. It's something that I enjoy doing with some of my locomotives that probably will not leave my collection. And being that I got this for such a great price from Trains, I really couldn't pass it up. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. What are your thoughts on this locomotive compared to the U28C? Again, it's the same tooling. You know, I was, again, a little bit of a bummer that this didn't have the original legacy board in it, but it works out really well as I run it in my Conrail consist. So really happy to have this in my collection. Thanks again for watching, guys. If you need a locomotive, hit up Trains. Going to trains.com/CTAT, and that'll help support the channel, and we greatly appreciate that. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We will catch you on the next one.